how did you get into being um an advocate and an activist? Like what caused that? Because I know that's a big part of not just your music, but also when you're not being a mom and when you're not working, like that's a
Hmm.
big part of your life. And you had me come and speak some years
That's
ago
right.
at a panel that you had a panel discussion.
Hmm.
What got you into that?
So, I was sexually abused several times between the age of 9 and 15, and it definitely had a very negative impact on my life, which is another reason why I wouldn't change having my children because they help keep me centered and help keep me sane and from going off the rails. You know what I mean? Because if it wasn't for them, then there's no telling what all I would have gotten into because I had nothing. I didn't have anything to, I wouldn't have had anything to live for. And I had them. So I was just trying all kinds of stuff. I mean, um, from lifestyles to trying to get help by going to counseling to different religions to jumping out of one relationship into another, like looking for love in several different places. So it wasn't until I moved here, and it was kind of like um you had mentioned before about kind of like when you're sitting alone and you only have yourself. It even reminds me of the pandemic, when we couldn't go anywhere. That's
Mm-hmm.
when it's like you you really, that's when you really are going to you're going to have to face everything because you're
Mm-hmm.
sitting still.
Right.
And so for me, like when I first moved here, I chose to move to Memphis because I'm like, I need to get away, I need to start over, and I need to go somewhere where no one knows me, like where I
Mm-hmm.
don't know anybody and nobody knows me. And I only have my children, and also at that time, my children were spending every summer with my parents. So I moved here in May of '06, and it was just me because my children were with my mom and dad. So that's when I started getting into spoken word. I started hitting up the spoken word spots, and that's when I started writing my own poetry
Mm-hmm.
too. And so that's where I started releasing my pain. Like I had been trying to go to counseling and, different therapies and medicines and like I said, religions, and I couldn't find my peace. I couldn't find my
Mm-hmm.
healing anywhere.
Right.
And so I started putting my pain, writing about my pain, using the pen to express my pain and, putting it on paper, and then I started to perform it.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first time that I performed a piece where I talked about how I had been sexually abused, I was really surprised by the number of men and women that came up to me after I got through performing, saying it had happened to them. And I don't know, like for some reason in my mind, I don't want to say that I thought that I was the only person that had ever happened to.
Right.
I mean, if we're familiar with our story, as far as being brought over here from Africa, we
Right.
know
Right.
the hells that our ancestors went through. So we know that, being sexually abused and raped was a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I just wasn't expecting the reaction that I got. So then I started researching, and when I found out how many of our children are being sexually abused, and that our children have a greater chance of being sexually abused than their natural chance of being born left-handed, that's a pandemic in itself before we
Mm-hmm.
even heard of anything called COVID. And it's something that no one talks about. No one likes
Right.
to talk about it. And so I'm an advocate for children because number one, like if we don't protect them, like that's like the ultimate treason, right? I
Right.
mean, we always say the children are the future, you know.
Yeah.
So like our children and our elders are the most vulnerable members of our society, and they deserve to be protected. And so that's when I started focusing on children because it's like children grow up to be these broken adults.
Right.
And children need to know that they're heard, they're protected, and that they deserve to be children instead of, being abused. And so you have to start at the root, right? And
Yeah.
so the root is are the children. So that's what really drove me. Because I was surprised at the number of adults. And then as I got into the work, then I'm surprised by the number of children. Like, even though
Right.
I've been doing this for all these years now, it's still children every week, every day that
Mm-hmm.
this is still happening to, that I'm still having to help or try to help their parents or And it's just, it's an awful part of our society, that light needs to be shed on and action needs to be taken.
So, did you find it hard? Because you said like from 9 to 15, and I remember, I want to say we had the conversation because I had a piece I did where I kind of alluded to it, and we kind of talked after that, and that was kind of how we started having that conversation. But like for me, mine was between when I was 4 and when I was 6, and so like I remember for me, the initial thing was is like when I said something, if an older person is saying, "Oh, it wasn't me," you know how we grew up. If an adult or somebody older says you didn't do something or you did something, you're like, "Don't you lie on no adult," "Don't you lie
Hmm.
on no older person." So it's just like, okay, so like I just internalized it because like when I was 4, it was two sisters, and so it's like my word versus two of them. So I told, but it's like it's two people saying they didn't do anything. So it's like, okay, well, y'all ain't listening to me. So like, in my 4-year-old mind, I came up with ways of coping and trying to hide and trying to solve it myself. Um, and when I went through it again at 6, which this time it was a grown woman, I didn't even say anything because it's like when I was 4, y'all didn't believe me, y'all didn't listen.
Hmm.
So I'm just gonna figure out a way to get over it myself. Like, so it's a two-part question. Number one, did you have that experience? Like, when did you say anything, or was it not received if you did? And then also, do you find it like now when you talk to kids, like, have they had that similar experience where they don't say anything, or if they said something, nobody listen?
Keep it presidential.